So when we want to fold origami tessellations and when we want to design origami tessellations, one of the most helpful abstractions that I keep in my mind is what shapes are coming together and how are they coming together. This is the structure of the tessellation. It's what I refer to, or it's what's known as a tiling. In Robert Lang's Twist, Tilings, and Tessellations, this is what he's talking about. And I've got a course called Tessellations by Tiles that walks you through this understanding and helps you to not only see how to fold tessellations, but also see how to design your own. So in this video, we're going to walk through the basic idea of tilings, what's allowed and what's not allowed in these arrangements of shapes, and then take a look at what's in the course and see what it can help teach you about origami tessellations. So the first thing that I want to show is a selection of tilings. And these, mathematically speaking, are all tilings, but they're not all good for origami tessellations. And technically speaking, there's a lot of things here that I'm going to call by different names, like a tiling and a crease pattern, that also mathematically qualify as tessellations. But when I say tessellation, I mean a origami tessellation that has the folds causing the repeating pattern. So let's take these three tilings. These are uniform tilings of regular shapes, ones with squares, ones with hexagons, and ones with equilateral triangles. Two of these, the squares and the triangles, are great for origami tessellations because when we have twists, those are either right-handed or left-handed, and the pleat in between needs to go from a right-handed twist to a left-handed twist in order to lay down flat. That means that you need to alternate between right-handed and left-handed tiles, which you can show by coloring the tiling in two colors. That doesn't mean that you can't fold origami tessellations in tilings that you can't color with only two colors. So let's see if we tried to color this hexagon block in two colors without the same color bordering itself. We would go hexagon in, let's say, white, hexagon in red. This hexagon borders both white and red, so it can't be white and it can't be red. So what color is it going to be? It has to be a third color. So on squares, you could go white, red, back to white, and that's possible because we have 4 shapes around a corner, specifically an even number. With the hexagons, we have 3, which is an odd number. With the triangles, we have 6 always, and that's an even number again, which lets us do this 2 coloring. So that's one factor as we look at these different tilings. So we can say, yes, this is 2 colorable. No, this is not. Yes, 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 no. This one breaks a different rule, which is that an edge has to match up exactly with another edge. You can't have an edge that goes halfway across an edge and then have another shape start. So what we're looking for are these tilings with even degree vertices, so 2 colorable tilings, using shapes that can be found on a background grid. Now, the background grid isn't 100% necessary, but it's a lot more convenient for folding and testing to be able to just go sit down with your paper and a bone folder and fold a grid and then fold the pattern than need a laser cutter, need some kind of mechanical scoring device, like a Cricut or Cameo Silhouette or something else. And so it's much lower budget to do your tessellations by hand. And that's what I teach. So if I scroll down through these, you can see I've colored a bunch of my tilings in these two colors, the red and the white. And there's really not a limit to how many different tilings you can find. It just depends how much grid you're willing to use while doing it. So you can put some really funky shapes in there. You can do some crazy things. This is getting into an idea that I call a tiling break, which is the idea that there's some shape, some smooth shape without lumps cut out of it. In math, we call this a convex shape that holds a group of tiles. And that's an excellent stopping point for folding a tessellation. And one thing I hadn't mentioned yet is the connection between the tiling and the tessellation. So let's say we're looking at this stripes of rhombi and equilateral triangles pattern. Each of these dots is representing a twist, and the lines between dots represent a pleat that goes between twists. So this is really the underlying logic to all twist-based origami tessellations. You have some shape, and that shape determines the directions that the pleats are going out. And you have some twist. It could be a closed twist, an open twist on the front or on the back. That's not specified by the tiling. And all of those options are going to have the same directions of pleats leaving the twist. It's the directions of the pleats that the tiling is talking about. And the directions of pleats and how the different twists are connected is what determines whether all the pleats will lay flat. Like if you have those right-handed twists only connected to left-handed twists, all of those pleats will lay flat. And then we can decide, like, okay, which twist is going to go here? Now that we know the structure, we know how it's connected, but which rhombus, which triangle? That's the design choices that we get into in Tessellations by Tiles. So let's take a look at what's in the course itself now. We've got some introductions to, like, maybe you need to know how to fold thirds on a square grid. That's in there. And logistics around, like, what's the Zoom link for the monthly office hour? We have pre-recorded tiling workshops that I did on a weekly basis live with a group of students, and now those are recorded so you can go and see all of them as soon as you'd like. We've got a crease pattern library with over 150 patterns that illustrate all of the different tilings in those tiling workshops. We've got Inkscape templates so you can go and start playing with crease patterns of your own, of like, oh, this is going to pop in here, that's going to pop in there. Actually, I want to swap this twist in this pattern for a more open twist or a twist on the other side. And you can go in and play with the crease patterns to make your own designs. There's also recordings of workshops on framing and photography. And there's the office hours as well that I've been running for over a year now. So there's at least a dozen recorded hours of instruction in there. And that's often, hey, I'm having trouble with this pattern. Can we fold it together? Or let's take a look through my box of patterns that I've done a prototype in paper but haven't drawn a crease pattern for yet. And go and let that guide us and find a pattern, draw the crease pattern, see how it repeats, see how it functions. And there's all kinds of other questions that could be asked in an office hour too. And those happen on, for this course, the third Tuesday of the month at noon Eastern time, so New York time. And let's take a look at what tiling workshops there are. There's some tilings that are repeated because there's multiple ways of looking at them. There's alternating twists, and then there's more complex ways. So the square tiling, the equilateral triangle tiling, the hexagons and triangles six-fold tiling, 8 and 4 right triangles, and then a bunch of tilings that have just one workshop per tiling. So 2 other ways of arranging hexagons and triangles, the aligned rhombi tiling, which I found out recently is not the only way to arrange. Well, I already knew it wasn't the only way to arrange rhombus shapes. I just didn't know that there were origami tessellations that worked in that other arrangement, which actually was shown earlier in the video in that document of a bunch of tilings. A way of arranging just rhombi and triangles. A couple different tilings that are focused on right triangles, because that's another thing you can do from a square grid. And then bringing together hexagons, triangles, and rhombi. Another way of doing rhombi and triangles. More hexagons, triangles, and rhombi. And again, bringing in trapezoids in 3 different ways. And then you can see this hexagons tiling that we were discussing towards the beginning uses 3 colors, but we can still use it if we accommodate that. If we have one twist, like let's say the green twist, where half the pleats are acting left-handed and half of the pleats are acting right-handed, which you can do in isoarea twists. And you can also do in arrangements of pleats that intersect and lay down flat using only grid lines. So these are all of the different structures that we work on in Tessellations by Tiles. And I'm just going to click into one of these lessons to show you what that looks like on the inside. So we've got the video recording. It's almost 2 hours long of going through and talking about, okay, what is this structure? How does it work? How are we going to go about folding it? And then actually going through the folding process for a simple example in that tiling. So bring a grid to these. Here it's a 24-fold triangle grid on a hexagon, which I specify in the caption for the video. And then we work through the folding, and then we go and design a new pattern, like in the workshop, in the video, where we say, okay, for this hexagon, and I'll call on people, I'll say, hey, do you want it to be open or closed? The next shape is a triangle. Do you want it to be on the same side or the opposite side? And then someone else, do you want it to be open or closed? And getting into some of those extended options also, where we can pick a second hexagon independent of the first one. And this is something we can do for any of the tilings, really, and build up our pattern one stage at a time. I also have animations for what shapes do we add before we get to a nice stopping point. So in this tiling, it's these rings of hexagons and the triangles that come with them. And we can go to the crease pattern library. We can see what we folded. In this particular design, we added some extra space in certain directions because that's something that's available with this tessellation. You don't need to repeat everything at the same distance. You can have some directions that are further apart than others. And there's also some downloads of the tree of what's going on, and then another PDF. And these tree structures, and actually let me get that one out to show you. So if I'm looking at these guys, I want the hexagons and triangles sixfold alternating tree, and looks like, well, one of these is the more updated one. So we've got those choices of, is that hexagon going to be closed or open? Is the next twist going to be on the same or opposite side? Should the triangle twist be closed or open? And then we've got these spacing options. So this pattern corset is the one that was designed in that workshop for the course. And there's other options as well. So you get the flagstone options by changing the spacing of the lesson that was taught in the Tessellations by Tiles workshop. So there's all kinds of things you can learn from these lessons. And again, there's 24 different lessons. So for the rest of this video, I want to take a look through some of the tessellation patterns that can be generated with these tilings, and also answer any questions that you have. So I am keeping an eye on the chat. Hello, Nancy and Carolina. Glad to see y'all joining us. And I'm gonna be walking through some of these different options. So this is on a site on my website, the gallery site, and you can sign up for the Tessellations by Tiles course on a link on that site. The link is also in the description below this video. And I'm going to be walking through some of these structures. And the workshops that are recorded in Tessellations by Tiles are from the summer of 2022. So those workshops are focused on the basic twists and don't have quite as much in terms of symmetry extensions as some of my later designs, which is helpful for really nailing down the basics, because even with an hour and a half, 2 hours on each topic, there's a lot that can't be covered. So hexagons and triangles sixfold is one of the tilings that we were looking at inside of the Tessellations by Tiles course. There's all kinds of different options that can be folded with this tiling. This is that corset pattern that was designed in that workshop. And just an incredible variety of options, several of which I discuss more in the second hexagons and triangles sixfold lesson. These patterns use rhombus twists, but I still count them as hexagons and triangles sixfold because it's a whole group of twists that acts like a hexagon that has only one pleat leaving it in those 6 directions corresponding to the sides of a hexagon, and then alternates with triangles. And you can get really wild with these patterns. It's just incredible how many different things you can do with it. So one of the things that I hadn't mentioned yet today is that I'll be debuting some course bundles by the end of the week. And these bundles will have tessellations by tiles and also tessellation garden, which has the crease patterns for all of the patterns that I'm showing here and many more. So the square tiling was another one we looked at. Here's an alternating pattern with hybrid square twists. We also have some mirrored patterns with square twists, and that is something that's discussed in tessellations by tiles. We have some extended symmetry options. The compound square twists didn't make it into tessellations by tiles, but the same theory applies whether you have one pleat leaving an edge of a tile or two. And so we can come through, and some of these patterns will be familiar from previous live streams. Some of them will look completely new. Here again is a pattern like corset, like the one we were looking at designed in tessellations by tiles, that uses spacing to create a new pattern from an alternating pattern that has a simple structure. And so hexagons, triangles, rhombus, triangles, this is another tiling that's included in tessellations by tiles that has an incredible amount of variety. And this one in particular has a ton of variety because you can choose your hexagon, your triangle, your rhombus independently. So that's hexagon open or closed, triangle open or closed on the front or the back, rhombus open or closed on the front or the back. That's 2 to the 5th, 32 different options right off the bat. And then you can have symmetry extensions like this pattern and this pattern. You can have all kinds of crazy things going on after those 32 choices. Hex rom tri rom is another structure that's taught inside of tessellations by tiles. Here we have the lens star pattern that has been pretty popular. And this one also has a lot of choices. It's not as obvious when you're sticking with the fundamental symmetry of the hexagon, the rhombus, and the triangle are all in positions of rotational symmetry. But you can get some crazy different options as you extend that symmetry further out. And these last two extend the symmetry further out and incorporate mixed depth rhombus twists into patterns that start with normal rhombus twists. So lots of crazy stuff there. Likewise, hexagons and triangles threefold. It's in tessellations by tiles. We have lots of different options. And you can start incorporating these hybrid hexagon twists to get even more patterns than what I teach in tessellations by tiles. Hex rom tri rom expanded. This is an easy way to get more options out of the hexagon, rhombus, triangle, rhombus tiling, and is also in tessellations by tiles. Many of these patterns will be familiar from the Advent of Tessellation series. Equilateral triangles. When in tessellations by tiles, we look at both alternating and these different cluster options. So a lot of these patterns here are in the cluster 4 symmetry application. And then there's all kinds of other things that you can do as well. This one is not in tessellations by tiles, the pinwheel hexagons, but the star rhombi and 2 triangles is. Pebbled is the tessellation taught in that one, and pebbled is precisely a spaced version of emergent triangles. So if we look at these two tessellations side by side, they may not look like they're extraordinarily similar, besides the color and the shapes used. But if you look closely, you'll see, okay, here we have a rhombus on this side and the rhombus on the other side. Rhombus on this side, other side, this side, other side, alternating around. That's the same thing we have over here. And we've got these groups of 3 rhombi that are the same as these groups of 3 rhombi, and these groups of 3 triangles that are the same as these groups of 3 triangles, just smushed together a bit more. Mixed squares and right triangles. A couple of these patterns only exist because of the Tessellations by Tiles course, where I was looking more deeply into these structures. This one, Waffles, was even named by a Tessellations by Tiles student. The trapezoids tiling is in Tessellations by Tiles. Split rhombi 1 as well. The hex double rhomb tri didn't quite make it in. Even with 20 different tilings, there were restrictions. Hexagons tiling is in there. This pattern, Bubbles, is the one taught in the lecture, the workshop rather. Likewise, aligned rhombi, we've got strict alternation, and we've got alternation with extra spacing. So these are things that are coming out of these workshops. Split hexagons triangle 6-fold also is the tiling in Tessellations by Tiles. This one, not so much. Or that one, or that one. As you saw in the beginning, there's a lot more tilings than I was able to fit in to Tessellations by Tiles. Large squares and right triangles is a great one in Tessellations by Tiles, as is hexagons and triangles 2-fold, 8 and 4 right triangles. Let's see, the trapezoids and 6 triangles is also in there. And there's a bunch more tilings here. So there's a lot more tilings in Tessellation Garden than there are in Tessellations by Tiles. But that habit of analyzing the tilings so that you can see, okay, these shapes are connected, these groups of shapes make a good stopping point. This is the skill from Tessellations by Tiles, and then saying, okay, there are all these different shapes, all these distinct shapes. This is letting me see where the choice points are in designing, where the symmetry points are going to be as I work my way around, so I can see, okay, these shapes are going to repeat like this because that's where the symmetry point needs to go. So that's my summary of what's in Tessellations by Tiles. You can sign up for that course right away. And then in the next few days, I'll be releasing these bundles of tessellation courses that I've put together that cover not just the folding and design skills, but also the entire hundreds and hundreds of patterns that make up my body of designs, as crease patterns and recommendations of next easier and next harder, and more explanations of how to fold and use advanced twist and advanced tilings. That would be advanced twist techniques. So there's a whole bunch of different options for learning to fold origami tessellations. But if you're going to try and design your own patterns, I think that a really deep understanding of the tilings and the options that come with those tilings is really essential. And yeah, Nancy, that's a really great point, that Tessellation Garden is just the crease patterns and photos and difficulty levels and recommendations of next easier and next harder. It doesn't have video instructions for all of those hundreds of patterns. So happy folding, everyone. Have a great day, and I will hopefully see you in the next Tessellations by Tiles office hour. See you later.